everyone, I'm Mel the Scientist. Welcome to the video. Today, I will be looking at stupidly dangerous things mad scientists did to themselves. As a scientist myself, I cannot imagine myself doing anything stupid and or dangerous because I do not like pain and suffering. So I hope and pray that I do not become blinded by whatever research that I'm doing, and I put myself in harm's way in order to achieve a result. Because that tends not to go well. But I want to look at other scientists and see what they've done to themselves that got them killed or permanently disfigured / injured. Let's take a look.
Have you ever been so sure you're right that you were willing to bet your life on it?
No.
Well, the world of science occasionally attracts people ready to take that test, walking the line between braveness and serious stupidity. So, forget all about safety regulations, because when no one else was willing, these mad scientists used themselves as the guinea pigs.
No ma'am, no ham.
The smoking ear. When it comes to self-experimentation, few scientists are as prolific as JBS Haldane. This British Indian physician of the early 20th century conducted many experiments spanning a variety of fields. But he was particularly interested in the effects of deep-sea diving on sailors. He would often place himself in a decompression chamber to simulate the effects and record the results he experienced firsthand. On one occasion, the effects of rapid decompression gave him an oxygen-induced seizure, leading him to crush several vertebrae in the process. Undeterred, he returned to the chamber and continued his experiments, in one case rupturing his eardrum when he accelerated the decompression process too fast. In later life, he was quoted saying, "If a hole remains in the eardrum, although one is somewhat deaf, one can blow tobacco smoke out of the ear in question, which is a social accomplishment." Sounds like he's tried that before.
Yeah.
It's a worthwhile accomplishment. Henry Smolenski's flying car. Is it a car? Is it a plane? Is it really a good idea? Henry Smolensky was fed up with his engineering job and quit to pursue his one true dream: manufacturing the world's first commercially viable flying car. His plan consisted of pimping out a Ford Pinto with the wings and tail of a Cessna Skymaster. Despite there being some concerns surrounding the considerable weight of the car in relation to its wings, the business looked set to take off.
Because you have to think of that.
After a number of successful test flights, the launch of commercial production was mere months away. But while Smolensky, alongside his company's co-founder, were taking the hybrid vehicle out for a further test flight, their dream came crashing down to earth.
Literally.
Through a combination of poor welding and faulty locking mechanisms, the wing support failed and the car plummeted to the ground. Sadly, both passengers and pilot died in the fiery blaze. And so did your chances of owning a flying car.
I wouldn't want one.
Bedbug invaders. Anyone who's experienced bedbugs will tell you. Do anything to get rid of those critters. Bizarrely, that's not the case for Regina Grease. She and her husband were both biologists working to synthesize a pheromone that would lure the pests away from our furniture. However, the research process for the product isn't for the squeamish. Since 2006, Grease has subjected herself to 200,000 bedbug bites. She fills up to 5 jars at a time with 200 insects each. She then lays them against the length of her forearm and allows them to feast. Why? Well, she'd previously tried to keep the bugs fed on chicken and guinea pig blood, but the feeding process had been fraught with complications and issues. So to simplify things, she decided to offer up their own blood for dinner. Bedbugs occasionally carry parasitic diseases like Chagas disease, which can cause heart failure. So the experiment isn't just gross, it's suicidal too. But if it'll mean never having to worry about bedbugs again, I'm all for it.
Only for you to die and not have to worry about it anyway.
Rad couple. The work of Pierre and Marie Curie was absolutely instrumental to our understanding.
Yeah, she's quite famous for what she did to herself.
Unfortunately for them, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the scientific community knew very little about how dangerous these elements really were. Thanks to this lack of understanding, the amount of time the married couple spent surrounded by high levels of radioactivity was staggering. To put it in perspective, modern-day researchers can only handle Curie scientific papers while wearing protective clothing. And they're stored in lead-lined boxes the rest of the time. Pierre was particularly reckless when it came to irradiating himself. In 1903, he was preparing a presentation for the British Royal Institute.
He touched it with his hands.
He wanted to display the effect that radium had on the human body for possible use in cancer treatment. So in preparation, he taped a sample of radium against his arm for 10 hours.
I didn't know this.
A bad radiation burn on his skin. He presented his fresh-looking injury to the amazed scientist, only to reveal that he had performed the experiment over a month earlier. These types of experiments, the severity of which was not apparent at the time, were commonplace for the married couple and led to various health issues.
Oh God, that has to be
kept a sample of
terrible way to die,
as she enjoyed the way it glowed. While Marie would later suffer and die from radiation-related illnesses, Pierre died when he was run over by a horse and cart. Neither of them ever,
to be honest, that might have been better,
realized the risks of radiation exposure.
Yeah.
They only saw its potential in treating cancer. Stapp's rocket sled. The motto of the U.S. Air Force advocates service before self, and Colonel John Stapp certainly lived by those words. Stapp made his name studying the effects of deceleration on his body. In 1945, little was known about what damage is done to the body in the event of an abrupt stop. This was something the military was very keen to understand to help its pilots. So, with the funding of the Wright Air Development Center, Stapp
used
went
a
about
dummy.
building a rocket sled nicknamed the Gee-Whiz. Fully aware that he could seriously harm or even kill himself, Stapp strapped himself in and went to work. Over the next 10 years, he submitted himself to dangerous levels of G-force and speeds of up to 632
killing himself slowly,
earning the title of fastest man on Earth. These wild speeds were reached in as little as 5 seconds, and the sled would often decelerate to a stop in 1 second. Of course, forces as high as 46.2 Gs didn't come without cost. Fractured wrists, broken ribs, and even lost fillings were all in a day's work. And in 1954, Stapp even detached his retina. It felt somewhat like the extraction of a molar without anesthesia. Despite this, there was no stopping Stapp, and he would carry out 29 crazy rides of this kind.
He's still alive. I mean, he lived?
After years of research in 1984, microbiologist Barry Marshall was convinced he'd figured out what caused certain types of stomach ulcers. But he needed to prove it. The quickest way to do so was by infecting someone with a nasty strain of the bacteria he thought was responsible, called Helicobacter pylori. But the hospital ethics committee refused to give him permission to test his hypothesis
for obvious
on anyone.
reasons.
So, you guessed it, he ingested a broth containing the bacteria himself.
Oh, not the broth.
He contracted gastritis within days, much sooner than he'd expected. Despite the vomiting, ulcers, and in his wife's words, putrid breath, Marshall was overjoyed. After publishing his findings, he was awarded with the Nobel Prize for his selfless disregard for his health and marriage.
Good for you.
Hopefully his next work will be devising the perfect breath mint. Getting an earful. Sometimes scientists do things that just leave us scratching our heads, and that sometimes leave them scratching their own. In 1993, New York-based veterinarian Robert Lopez was posed a question by one of his clients. Can humans catch ear mites from their pets? After a brief period researching the phenomena, he found that, not entirely surprisingly, a practical study had yet to be carried out.
Really?
He decided to step up to the plate, transferring some of the mites from the cat's ear into his own. He said he could immediately hear scratching as the tiny parasites headed down his ear canal. Soon, he was struck by an intense itching sensation that didn't stop for weeks. It took over a month for the critters, only for him to repeat the experiment
again
2 more times. He thoroughly answered that client's question and proved that when a scientist is curious, sometimes they just have to scratch that itch. Chest pains.
He calls the itch.
Heart catheterization, a process where a tube is threaded through a large blood vessel all the way to the heart, is one of the most intricate procedures in all of medicine. For many years, doctors believed it would kill a patient if performed. Enter 24-year-old Werner Forsman, fresh out of Berlin Medical School and full of confidence.
I know.
He was so sure that the procedure could be done that in 1929 he hatched a plan. He took a urinary catheter and stuck it in his arm. He then fed the needle 25 inches through a vein, eventually reaching his heart. Forsman then rushed over to the radiology department to take an x-ray of this never-before-seen procedure. The x-ray technician was understandably horrified. It took 26 years before the scientific community recognized Forsman's brave efforts, and he was eventually awarded the Nobel Prize.
Good for him.
I just hope they awarded that x-ray technician a nice glass of water and a blanket after that traumatic experience.
Yeah.
Once bitten, twice shy. The black widow spider is feared for a reason. But it wasn't until 1933 that scientists fully understood quite how dangerous they really are. A professor named Alan Blair was studying the toxicology of the female black widow at Alabama University. He was particularly interested in the effect of their bite on humans. So, throwing caution to the wind, he placed the spider on the end of his finger and let it bite him for 10 seconds. Over the next 24 hours, Blair was subjected to an intensely painful experience. He was taken to the hospital where he suffered tremors, vomiting, and a stiff, board-like abdomen and limbs. If you've ever had a cramp, just imagine that applied to your entire torso. Yep, horrendous. He was finally discharged a full day later. The original intention of the experiment was to test whether repeated exposure to the toxins would build up immunity to the bite. But Blair said he, understandably, lacked the courage when faced with the prospect of going through the experience again.
He's smarter than you.
Pinpoint discovery. Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." But after hearing about this next experiment, you wonder how he could see it all. The great 17th century scientist may be most famous for his discovery of gravity, but he was also fascinated by the study of optics. His work with glass prisms revealed that color was a property of light and could be manipulated through refraction. But Newton wasn't content with merely understanding the properties of light.
They never
He
are.
wanted to know how humans perceive it in the first place and how physically altering the eye could change this perception.
Ew.
So Newton took a large sewing needle, known as a bodkin, and inserted it, in his words, betwixt eye and bone, as near to the backside of the eye as possible. In case you didn't catch that,
Oh
he stuck
my
the needle in
God.
the gap
Oh
between his
my
eyeball and skull
God.
and wiggled it around to see what happened. As he manipulated the back of his eyeball, he noted down the colors and shapes the compressions caused him to see. These distortions were caused by compressing certain color receptors in the eye, but this wouldn't be discovered for many years. The father of modern science was clearly not squeamish, as he went on to repeat the experiment a number of times to test the differences in light and dark surroundings. He claimed it was just science, but I suspect he was just seeking some visual entertainment in an age before TV. Antarctic appendectomy. In 1961, Leonid Rogasov was the only doctor stationed at the Soviet-Russian Novolazarevskaya base in Antarctica. Weather conditions were particularly bad, and when a blizzard moved in over the area, nobody could get in or out of the building. When Rogasov began to experience severe pain in his lower abdomen, he soon identified his issue as appendicitis. But trapped inside with the nearest Soviet base 1,000 miles away, getting another doctor to treat him was out of the question. Rogasov initially tried administering non-invasive measures, but when they didn't work, he had to resort to the only option. With two colleagues holding mirrors up so he could see what he was doing, the doctor began his self-appendectomy. Between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., he performed surgery on his own torso, successfully removing the inflamed organ. After 2 weeks in bed, he returned back to his duties, and I can barely trim my own toenails. Leonid Rogasov undoubtedly falls on the brave and inescapably Russian side of the mad scientist label. Which of these scientists do you think were the bravest? And which ones were just plain stupid? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.
Good Lord. No. Yes, I'm going to try and get a Nobel Prize without doing anything like that. Like anything that was done here. I thought he would mention Marie Curie and her husband, because I mean honestly that is still one of the more memorable ones. I mean like this is showing right here, they literally had to use all the protective gear to even touch her journals. Like but the thing is, we know a lot more about it because of them, so it's like bittersweet, you know. I couldn't have done it. I would not have done it. I will not do it. Now, if I had to, bravest is definitely, I would say, the final entry, that Russian doctor. Props to him, because there was nobody else but him, like, with the ability to do that. So, big up to him, because I would have just had to take that L. I feel like I would have just taken that L. That was a very brave thing to do. He was stupid. Who else was stupid? She was just out of her mind. The flying car, I mean, what else is there to say about that? Who else? A smoking ear. This dude is crazy. I mean, I see where he was going, trying to, you know, figure out, you know, deep sea compression and stuff like that. I get that. That is something you would want to know. But I feel like I would have just created a nice life-size dummy. Who else? The dude with the bad breath who, you know, injected himself with that bacteria. That was stupid. Dude who put bed bugs in his ear. Oh no, not bed bugs. What were those? Ear mites. That was stupid. Dude who Spider-Man'd himself. I mean, not the dumbest thing on this list, but I still would never do that. Newton, mother effing crazy. Why would you do that? I mean, you know dang well you might blind yourself, and yet you do that. But yeah, I would say the only one whose respect I kind of truly have is the Antarctic Russian doctor, and Marie Curie still does have my respect in that regard. So yeah, radiation is not to be played with, and I feel like she definitely had of the scientists that died in this list, worse. She gets the worst. She'll probably always be one of the worst, because radiation poisoning is terrifying and something that no one ever wants to experience. And if you've seen HBO's Chernobyl, that's also a good visual for how it could happen. It's amazing how far scientists are willing to go. Like I said, I joke with my boss all the time about how, actually my boss jokes about this too, about how like we would be those scientists that kind of just like don't do, we're the non-field work scientists. I mean, depending on what it is, really. I can't wait to be able to do research that changes the world and revolutionizes what we think about science today. I can't wait to be a part of something like that. But I would never, not at the risk of myself. So I do work with bacteria. I work with E. coli specifically, and we simulate the genetic engineering processes used to produce medicines like insulin. So I do work with bacteria. But I make sure I take every step to make sure it doesn't touch my skin. No, I can't even think about the ramifications of being that reckless and careless with myself. I love this life. I want to go on to do amazing things in the science world, and I need to be alive in order to do that. And I would like to be alive to get rewarded for it as well. So that's where I'm at. But if you liked the video, please drop a like. I would very much appreciate it. If you liked, commented, and subscribed to the channel, I would appreciate it. The majority of you who watch my content are not subscribed, and that is a bummer, and I would really appreciate your support. But thank you so much for even getting through the end of this video. And yeah, I had fun.